Today, we are covering a super important topic, and that is how not to become house poor when you're buying your first house. Look, I know housing prices are through the roof, mortgage interest rates are through the roof, and it's not exactly like salaries are keeping up. I mean, heck, everything right now is expensive. But when you're going to buy your first house, it is critical that you don't strap yourself into a payment that you cannot comfortably afford. So let's talk about some of the reasons people do this and how you can avoid these mistakes. All right, buying your first home is super exciting, but if you extend your budget, if you buy something you actually cannot afford, it can become the biggest nightmare. People have lost not only their houses, but a lot of financial headway and have changed the trajectory of their life because they've made poor decisions when they're buying a home. So don't do that. It's very dangerous. When you spend at the top of your budget, you're actually foregoing a lot of wiggle room that you have in your budget for other things. And you need to write all of those things down. You really do need to know exactly how much you spend every month. So make sure that you know things that you absolutely like to do, like travel, eating out. Maybe you like to go to a movie. Maybe you like to go to Starbucks and drink coffee, expensive coffees, and you don't want to make it at home. That's a little luxury that you have. You need to know what your budget is every month, because if you can't do those things anymore, you're going to hate your life. So what exactly does it mean to be house poor? Well, it's essentially when too much of your budget is going towards your mortgage. I mean, there's no sense in having a beautiful house and not being able to do anything else with your life. And a lot of people get into this situation because they do not take the experts' advice. Now, experts say that only 30% of your gross income, which means your total income, should go to your housing expenses. Now, what are your housing expenses? That's your mortgage payment, your insurance, your taxes, your homeowners association, and you should really consider keeping your budget really no more than 35% of your gross income. So how can you calculate that for yourself? Just take how much you made last year, look on your W-2, divide that by 12, and multiply that by 0.3 or 0.35. That's going to give you a really good rule of thumb. So let's say you make $10,000 a month. 30% of that is $3,000. That's your all-in mortgage payment. All right, so now let's get practical. What are some steps and some tips that you can take to make sure that you stay within your budget and do not become house poor? The first thing you have to do is you have to set a realistic budget. And if you don't know what your realistic budget is, you need to speak to a loan officer. But you need to tell them specifically, I do not want my housing ratio to be more than 30 or 35% of my income. Why do I say that? Because a mortgage loan officer like me, I can qualify you for much more than 30 or 35%. In some loans, we can go all the way up to maybe 50% of your gross income. So in our example before, if you made $10,000 a month, your house payment you might be able to get qualified for could be $5,000 a month. That is a super expensive payment, and that's not going to leave you with much budget for anything else, like an emergency or a vacation, or really a lot of medical emergencies. Everything can be very expensive, so you want to save for a rainy day. So tell your lender, I do not want to go above 30 or 35% of my gross ratio. Okay, that's a tip for you when you're talking to your lender. All right, so now that you've talked to a lender, you know what your realistic budget is. Make sure you stay within that. You might be looking on Zillow or realtor.com, and you're seeing all these beautiful houses and it just is beyond the reach of your budget. I recommend do not do this. I tell people all the time, your first house is not your dream house. Your first house is going to get you into that dream house. If it were me and I was starting over and buying my first house, and I actually did this for myself, I bought the ugliest house that I could afford in the best area, and it was well within my budget. I actually got roommates, and I was able to turn a nice profit on that house because I painted it. My parents came over, we painted the cabinets. I completely, made it look as cute as I could on my limited budget, and I sold it for a profit 4 years later. That profit has since gone on to buy other homes, other investment properties, and has set me up pretty good. But if I had started out buying the max budget that I could afford, and I had stretched myself and I was not realistic with that budget, I'd be in a totally different financial situation, because when I sold my house, it was the recession, the Great Recession, my first house, and I was lucky to get out of it. And I was lucky to get out of it with equity. A lot of people didn't have that luxury, and that could happen again. All right, when you're buying a house, you need to account for the extras. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just walking into a house, it's going to be kind of like renting. No, it isn't. Everything costs money when you own a home. I always like to give this example. We had rats in our house when we first moved into it. That's disgusting. It has to go. You would think it would not cost much to get rid of the rats in your attic. It actually costs like $2,000. And a $2,000 hit right away after you've spent money on moving and closing costs and everything associated with connecting your utilities, that's expensive. I also tell people, look at the cost of appliances right now. A washer and dryer is like $1,000. A refrigerator is well over $1,000. So you have to look at the expenses that you're going to see. If your water heater breaks down, that could be $1,500 right then and there. So you need to budget for these things, because they will happen when you buy a home. And that brings me to my next tip, and that is absolutely you must have an emergency fund. It always scares me when people want to buy a house and they really are using their last dime for the down payment and the closing costs, because you need to save for a rainy day. We just talked about housing expenses, but other things can happen. Your car could break down, you could lose your job, God forbid you have a medical situation you have to deal with. All of those things you need to save for a rainy day. So have a budget, stick to it, have a contingency plan if things go wrong, and hopefully they won't, but if they do, you will know that you can handle it. At the end of the day, your home should be your haven. You absolutely should feel comfortable in your home. You should feel like yourself in your home, and it should bring you peace. If you're overextended on your home, you're not going to feel peace, you're going to feel stress. And there's nothing worse. I always like to remind people, life is not about accumulation. It really isn't. As I get older, I just think, gosh, I wasted a lot of time thinking that I needed to achieve certain things. And really what I needed to do was surround myself with people that I love in a home that is comfortable and affordable for us. And we get to do things together as a family that we probably wouldn't if we lived in a bigger home. Even me, I really do think, I do want to live in a bigger house. I do sometimes think, gosh, I'd love to have a new kitchen. I don't even have a basement. I'd love to have a basement, but I don't. And so am I going to move into something that costs me much more than the house that I live in? Probably not, because it's not a wise financial decision. And the fact of the matter is, that's a luxury, and I really don't need it. Now, if you're buying your first home, just remember your first home is not your dream home, but it can get you to your dream home, and it can get you to where you need to be. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe for more content. And if you're looking for a house and you need a mortgage lender, just want someone to talk to about it, give me a call. I'd love to help.